In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnetude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. Today's episode is a little different than usual, and it's going to be a special one. Today's guest is going to be me. I will be stepping out of the host seat and into the hot seat to share more about my own journey and dive into some of the lessons that I've learned around leadership, go-to-market strategy, and driving innovation and transformation within my own organization. And I couldn't think of anyone better to guide today's conversation than the woman I'm about to introduce. We've been working together for over 12 years. She joined Magnetude Consulting as my second full-time hire back in 2013, just around year one of launching the business, and has played a pivotal role in the business ever since. She's an award-winning marketing strategist, including two-time winner of the Cybersecurity Marketer of the Year, and the brains behind some of our most creative and impactful campaigns and go-to-market strategies for clients. She's a key member of my leadership team and a valued colleague and friend. She's Magnitude's VP of Client Strategy and Delivery. So today's host I'd like to introduce is my colleague, Cindy Hunter. Welcome to the show, and thank you for leading us in today's episode.
Thank you, Natalie. I can't believe I get to put my boss on the hot seat, so I'm excited for this.
I am too, a little nervous. We'll see what you put in front of me.
I want to introduce you too, because, I know you do the podcast all the time, but you hardly ever get to say, what's so great about you, and this is about you. So Natalie is a marketing powerhouse. She's over 20 years in B2B. She's part strategist and part sales whisperer, in case you didn't know that. She's a former Forrester marketing guru, and she turned founder and CEO of Magnetude Consulting, which we'll talk a little bit about, where she helps tech firms, B2B firms scale with smart fractional marketing. She's worked in cyber, AI, SaaS, big data, the list goes on, products and services. If it's B2B and technical, she's helped companies grow countless times. She's a regular contributor on Forbes and public service announcement. If you haven't checked it out, you should. It's not just marketing speak that she talks about. It's really actionable insights designed to help businesses grow. So really go check that out as well. And as you know, 1 year in, she's the regular host of this Shift and Thrive podcast. And it really digs into how CEOs have an impact, go-to-market transformations, and tells a little bit about their personal stories too. So thrilled to kind of flip the script on Natalie and pick her amazing brain. And I'm excited to kind of move through some of these questions. You ready, Nat?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. So let's go into the Wayback Machine. Over a decade ago, and I was there alongside you, you founded Magnitude. So tell us about that journey, your go-to-market approach for the firm when you were just getting started.
So the idea for Magnitude really came after having spent the first part of my career and I would say the majority of my career prior to starting Magnitude in in-house marketing roles, often at resource-constrained companies. So I've been kind of the first marketing hire at a startup. I was on a marketing team of 3 and really saw a gap between what startups needed to do to be successful and what, the realities of being in a startup with resource constraints and only having the skill sets of the number of marketers you have on the team. And so really saw an opportunity to do marketing differently. Some of that was also influenced by my time at Forrester Research, where we had around 30 people in the marketing organization, and really being able to see what kind of marketing looks like when you do have all those experts coming together, which is not the luxury in the smaller company environments. And so Magnitude was really designed to become a different kind of marketing firm, and one that blended both marketing leadership and the strategic focuses of marketing as kind of a growth enabler to the business. And then also having full service execution such that you can have kind of the best of breed on the execution side and the strategy working hand in hand, which, for startups, they need both, and they need it back and forth and
Right.
very fluidly.
There's no unicorn marketing person, I don't think, anymore, for sure.
No. And I would say, like, even more since Magnitude was started, marketing became more and more specialized. The competitive landscape became kind of stronger and kind of more challenging. And so that need to really fire on all cylinders and do it the right way, I would say, is only underscored. And I'm sure you and I are going to talk about that as we go through the conversation.
Right. Were there guiding principles or areas you kind of rallied around initially, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And the interesting thing, like I mentioned, the initial focus was really on startups. I think one thing we found over, the first few years in particular was that the same things that we were doing for startups, we started getting interest and demand from larger companies that were, going through changes, their own kind of business transformations and things of that nature, because they needed that kind of full view into the strategy, the execution, all those different areas of specialization. But I would say, as it relates to kind of our model, there's maybe three pillars that I'll talk about.
Okay.
One was really, our delivery model in and of itself as something unique we were building. Second was really our industry focus and kind of building up that industry expertise. And then third is, I like to say we drink our own Kool-Aid. And so the investments that we've made in our own sales and marketing efforts, and, we can certainly delve in deeper into any of those.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the industry expertise, like, is that really important? Do you think it's important? And I know what a client thinks. So just from the outside, like some people say, doesn't matter. It's all the same. So could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say, there are some differences depending on your environment. A good marketer can learn kind of a new space. But as a service provider, especially working with often resource constrained businesses, you want to make sure that you're delivering value quickly and having an impact. And I think having that impact is where you really need that industry expertise so that you know the target market that your clients are selling into, the pain points that they're facing, you understand the ecosystem that they're in, because kind of the service provider, like partnership type landscape. And especially I would say for a lot of the types of audiences that we sell to, it's, technical leaders, executives, it's audiences that are notoriously apprehensive of being marketed and sold to, right?
Totally skeptical.
Yeah. So you have to have your marketing, any kind of messaging and content be very authentic and speak to that audience. So I think, all of those areas have really underscored kind of the importance of knowing that audience.
Yeah.
But I'd say a little bit of a balance, right? So we've always been under that B2B tech umbrella as far as the types of clients we serve. We now do have some clients in other industries or some kind of very successful engagements, but have also very much stayed true to the expertise that we've built in cybersecurity and IT services. And so that's, with your help, always having that right balance on the team of the industry experts and the kind of functional domain experts as well.
Right. And it's really neat to learn new industries too, and then make the connections.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we have plenty of examples of that, of where we've taken something that's been really successful in one industry and kind of brought it over to another, right. And you're selling B2B, you're selling, within an organization, the roles do interact with one another. And so being able to make those connections, like you say.
Right. That's great. So I'm going to transition us a little bit, because creating and growing company like you've done, it takes great leadership. And we've grown over the years, and that's a long time to be in charge. So talk about your leadership style and what shapes that, and how would you describe it? Maybe some of the background of how you're built.
Yeah, I'll kind of start a little bit further back, like in the pre-Magnitude days. I think when we get to present day, would love to also hear from you, Cindy. keep me honest. Um, but I would say, overall, my leadership style has been a combination of exposure to other leaders and things that I want to emulate, as well as areas to avoid. So, earlier in my career, especially in kind of the corporate environment, I had some amazing managers and mentors.
Me too.
At the same time, I also saw a lot of like the yes men culture of, had a manager, for example, that was very good at managing up, and very good at pushing things down without really kind of understanding what was behind that, what it would take, not always kind of speaking the truth of the reality of a situation to people that person had to report to, which never sat right with me. And so I think that's one of those areas that I've really internalized as, be very empathetic, be very thoughtful about what I'm asking, my team to do, being realistic about what they can take on, what I can take on, what's kind of the right way to like roll up our sleeves and partner to get stuff done. And doing so in a way that like I'm always, happy with how I show up for myself and for the team.
Well, and I think sometimes we forget about our roots because we were young. I was young at one point, right? When you come up through the ranks, you don't always remember those lessons and what that was like, to be in those shoes. So I do think that's like a great asset that you have for sure.
Before you ask me another question, can I ask you, like, what shaped your leadership style?
So I become, I think, much more patient. I think that, earlier in my career, it was all about like the getting ahead and, grabbing the spotlight and that type of thing. And I think today, I get much more value out of kind of looking, how is the team, delivering, and is that person evolving? How satisfied are the clients? Am I doing good work for them? So I do think that the things that motivate me now are very different. And I try to be pragmatic and ask a lot of questions of people. But as you know, I also have my strong opinion. And I don't want that to go away. So I think just having healthy discussions is a good thing. Does that answer the question, Natalie? And this is about you, not me.
It does. It does. Thank you.
So, and now fast forward, right? These are like, not the easiest of times. There's lots of change going on. The company like went through COVID, all of these things. But what are some of the things that you think have changed in how you lead over time?
Yeah, I do think there are a number of places. I would say, one area is really figuring out and how to surround myself with the right people, the right leaders, the right mentors. And I think I was fortunate, like I said early on in my career, I had a couple managers that were really like amazing and that showed me kind of the value of having those kinds of relationships and showing some vulnerability. In the Boston ecosystem, there's a lot of different support resources. So there was a program I went through called SCORE and it gave access to mentors and things like that. And I got my first exposure to peer groups, which, as you know, I'm now a very active member of Entrepreneurs Organization that I've been a part of for about 5 years now. And so I think understanding where my own strengths are, being very realistic about like where my own gaps are, like we always say, like nobody can be the expert in all things. And so understanding who to surround ourselves with. And I had a consultant that I was working with. It was, I guess, part business consultant, part kind of leadership coach turned friend as I was, just getting ready to build out the leadership team. And so she was very helpful in thinking about the right way for me to do that, but also gave me the lesson learned around really like trusting my gut and if harnessing my own instincts as a decision-making tool, because I am a bit risk adverse, which a lot of people think is an oxymoron for an entrepreneur. But so finding that right balance of like how much information do I need to make a decision? When do I push myself a little bit further? or faster than what would happen organically. And then I think, once we had kind of the formal leadership team structure in place, that was, a really great enabler for, decision making and team communications, and really looking at kind of the strategy of our own organization and our growth, and then what it would mean for my role as well as the other leaders in the organization.
But I think, and you've continued to invest in that leadership team. I know I've been the benefit of it. I'm just thinking about when we did the Enneagram, and honestly, eye-opening for me. But really enabling kind of the team dynamic for us to understand each other better.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was, I've mentioned Enneagram to numerous people over the years. I think it was maybe, 3 or 4 or 5, maybe years ago now that we went through that. And I know there's a lot of different personality assessments and leadership profiles and things of that nature. One of the things I really loved about Enneagram was it, talks about like each person's intrinsic motivation for showing up the way that they do. So it's things that are, not very changeable, but at the same time, having that awareness of kind of where you come from and how you kind of show up as a person, as a professional, and then understanding that about your colleagues. Similar to you, like I had some very like eye-opening moments there, which when I think back to now, I can't believe that at one point, not that long ago, I didn't know those things about myself.
Right.
But I also think it like opened up really good lines of communication between us on the leadership team. And that's something that I think is just very important to working well together as a tight-knit team.
Well, and I think that we were all different, right?
Yeah.
No overlap. So nice mix there, Natalie, building that. Great. I'm gonna shift gears a little bit. And I know the leadership is not easy, but we're in the midst now, and I don't want to say AI is new because I guess it's not. It's however many years. But the pace of change, I think, is unprecedented, right? And you early on, we're like, this is going to change the world. This is going to change our model. This is going to change a lot of the things that we do. And kind of had your finger on the pulse, and you're passionate about it. So can you just talk about, because I know it's top of mind for a lot of companies, how are you approaching it? How are you navigating it with the team? What kinds of changes is this bringing? And how are you getting through that right now?
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe I'll take like a quick step back to just talk about how it was when it first started. And I know, like you said, AI isn't new. The generative AI kind of wave that we're all experiencing now over the last few years is kind of where I'll focus. But as I mentioned, like I tend to be a bit risk adverse by nature. But when it came to AI and kind of ChatGPT first rolling out, I saw the writing on the wall like very quickly. And that was a case of like, trusting my gut and feeling like the change ahead was going to be massive. And actually using my risk aversion to push us to do something different, right? So that fear of becoming irrelevant and not evolving our delivery practices, our value proposition, that was really like a big push to kind of look at how we do things differently. At the same time, not wanting to rush, right? Like we've got some great practices and processes. We have like many longstanding client relationships where we're delivering kind of real impact to them. So there's always making sure that we're not making changes for the sake of changes, that we're
Right.
not over.
Don't mess it up.
Yeah. Like over relying on AI. And I know we all have our stories of like seeing things that were done haphazardly. So I think all of that kind of went into the thinking around what was the right approach for us. And the change management piece, I think from very early on was like, this can't be just me. It can't be just kind of the most technical people on our team. Like it really needed to be across the organization. Like we're all in this together. We're going through it together. So we had a lot of training and different project areas that people were experimenting with. And it started, I would say, formal in that we kept to our, cadences of how often we were meeting, who was sharing the information, all of that. But with enough flexibility that what it looked like, 6 months in was different than at the outset. And then 6 months from there, right? And now we're in a much different place in our AI journey than we were at those points. But I guess, I know you've been part of building that with me. But how did it feel for you, and anything around what you've heard from the team around the journey we're on?
Yeah. Well, as you know, like I was a curmudgeon about it in the beginning. I'm like, my whole career has been in marketing. This cannot possibly do what we do. And just in, and I know 2 years is not a lot of time in the scheme of things, but the pace at which it's accelerated to the point where personally, I'm turned on by thinking about what are the possibilities. Like, I think we're actually bumping up against now. It's not capable of doing all the things that we can imagine it's going to do. So to me, like that's exciting. And people don't get to go through this in their career all the time, right? So I think the future's unknown, but just the energy and passion we're bringing to it, and the thinking, critical thinking and processes. I think we just made such great strides forward already, and I'm excited to see what's next.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. Obviously, I think that pace of change is like exciting and overwhelming at the same
Right.
time. And I think depending on the day or the minute, like you can feel like you're more in one camp versus the other. But I keep, reminding myself this is a marathon, not a sprint. Beyond that, it's a marathon that likely will never end, right? So you got to
Right.
pace yourself, but also keep moving forward. And that mindset of like one foot in front of the other, continue to kind of prioritize and look at the right ways and places to use it. Self-education, right? So I've become more aware of like the skill sets that I have organically that kind of play well for this kind of new world, and the places where maybe I'm not as strong or less experienced, and how do you close that gaps? And so I think that's like the change management that needs to happen at each person's individual level, and not just kind of as a team or an organization. And hopefully our team has heard that, and I think everyone is kind of working on their own skills development, both through more structured things as well as on their own, to support kind of the way things are moving and kind of the changes in like marketing practices.
I mean, I think on our team, people they're curious, right? I mean,
Hmm.
to be successful here, you need to be curious. And I think that's serving us well on AI too, of like, okay, I'm going to have that motivation to teach and learn. And the sharing that happens, I think, among our team of like people that are discovering things and teaching the rest of us, is a really healthy model to have.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, and I think we have our company values, and I remember maybe about like a year into the AI journey, we revisited them to see has anything changed, has like where we're headed shifted anything. And I think we realized it hasn't. That our values are
Right.
still the same. The things, and I don't take for granted what you said about, right, everyone on the team is curious and wants to continue to improve their work, their own kind of skill set. That those are the things that like got us to where we are and will continue to take us where we need to be, even if some of the kind of specifics of what that looks like day to day from kind of an
Right.
execution or orchestration standpoint evolves.
Right. I mean, plus everybody's senior, like we've been in marketing forever, our whole careers. And knowing what's in our brain and now how to utilize AI to its best capabilities to help us do our job better.
Yeah.
Right. So I think you can't replace the experience that we have. The knowledge is essential. It's just the way that we do it might be different. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Exactly. Well, and I think, not to take us in a very different tangent, but the conversations around how does someone like younger, earlier in their career, how do they learn those things and learn how to effectively use these tools, I think is going to be important just for kind of society and business overall. Because I think to your point, like the fact that our team does have that experience and they know what good looks like and they know how to work with and all the different like functional areas of marketing means like you know how to get out of these tools what you need.
Right.
And unfortunately, like we've seen the cases of um, someone maybe outside of marketing thinking, oh, I'm just like, put a quick prompt together and, send it to ChatGPT and, I don't need content writers anymore. I don't need, marketers
Right.
in the same way, which like, yes, things are changing, but I think that eye on quality and kind of true thought leadership when it comes to content, like there's a lot of things that it's easier for things to go wrong, I think, in this environment than ever before. And so you need to have the folks that, like I said, like know what good looks like and how to harness it
Right.
in the right way.
Right.
And then we haven't touched on this, but really like getting some of those foundations in place to better kind of harness these tools, right? So some of the things that we did early on um, around like documenting our processes and making sure, our systems were all kind of set up in a way that would be conducive to kind of working with some of these platforms and
Right.
reporting visibility and all of those kinds of things I think are important building blocks as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not push button right now, you know?
Right.
So I think we're well equipped and that's a sign of a more mature company anyway, processes are documented and all of those types of things. So, great. So, and thank you because I know you could talk about AI through two episodes for
I
this.
sure could.
But it's not the only kind of big change, right? So there's economic uncertainty that's happening, shifts in the investment landscape. I know every day we're helping our clients, work through not only go to market, but transformations and all kinds of things. So, um, and we're here to give advice to people. So, what advice would you give to companies right now, who are trying to navigate like go to market and their approach in light of the landscape and what's going on in the world?
Yeah. I think
Okay.
first is just as you said, like understanding that we are in the middle of this kind of sea change when it comes to go to market. And I think a lot of companies haven't caught up either like conceptually or kind of in practice. So realizing how much has changed and maybe trying to continue some of the playbooks that worked for them, 3 years ago, 6 years ago, et cetera. And I think there's like the last few years with kind of AI and then the last year-ish of kind of the economic shifts and other things elsewhere in the world that are driving impact. But then even since the pandemic, tech was booming through the beginning of the pandemic. So in a lot of ways, our business did well. A lot of our clients' businesses were doing well. Others I know struggled, but it also really upped the ante of what companies were doing online, right? Because
Mm.
companies that were like very reliant, for example, on, conferences and sales like in person with, needing to shake hands and all of that had to move online. So that was part of the onus on all the companies to kind of keep pace in that way. And I think ultimately it created more digital competition, which then kind of
Right.
ultimately like ups the ante of how good does all of your digital execution need to be when there's more noise, more competition. You just have to, you're fighting for the mind share of your target market in a different way, which is why you need like the best in class execution and kind of maximizing every opportunity out of everything that you're executing on. But I think another area that maybe doesn't get talked about quite as much is the changes to the buyer, right? So um, the buyers today, again, they're facing the same kinds of things that uh, companies are on the service provider or vendor side, which I think they have more on their plates. Uh, they might be more skeptical, also more informed, like more places to go and get information.
Mhm.
And as some of these, decision makers are like millennials, Gen Z decision makers, they have different expectations about what they need and what a good digital experience looks like. So that, like, again, like ups the ante on that digital experience and being on all the channels where your target market is, having a website that really like makes it easy for your buyer to find the information that they're looking for, recognizing that I think we've all heard the metric many times by now of like how many times you need to get in touch with a buyer before they respond or before they're willing to talk to sales, like how much more
Right.
informed they are coming into that process. Like all of that has shifts in the marketing activities, but then also in sales. And so I think that role between kind of what is sales, what is marketing, how do they need to work together, has also shifted. And thankfully, like a lot of that being in digital forms, a lot of the activities that take place, you have some good tracking. So if you set it up correctly, you should have really good visibility into what's working, what's not, what's happening on the marketing side, what's happening on the sales side, and how do you create that full view of in a customer and prospect journey.
But I think we can't lose sight of also the fact that like there's still how do you create personal relationships because it's still people doing business with people. So, and I think it is definitely harder now because, some of us are remote or whatever, and for sales, they can't just pick up the phone because everybody's screening the calls. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges right now, and it's not easy to overcome that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the point about, right, like the personal relationships, because it is easy, especially when you're kind of like executing on digital areas, is to start to think of it as here's our segment, here's our persona, but forgetting that, there are people there. I think sales naturally has a easier time remembering that just because they are more kind of in those one-on-one settings. I actually think that, every marketer ideally should spend some time in sales because it does give you a different appreciation for the customer. And when you wonder why a campaign maybe didn't work, you look at it differently when you think about kind of the people that are behind that and what they face in their day-to-day and all of that. But also as digital will continue to become more and more crowded, I think we need to remember that, not to lose sight of the in-person, right? And the
Right.
opportunities to connect.
And I totally agree with kind of marketing people getting as close to not only through sales and with sales, but to the customer. I mean, I always tell you my favorite part of my job is talking to the client's customers, and understanding really, how as a person, how are you making decisions and those kinds of things. So agreed. That's a really great skill set for a marketing person to have. Um, okay. But if I ask you what do you wish CEOs understood when it comes to like marketing and go to market? Because we deal with lots of CEOs and we've had long careers, helping to launch products and all kinds of things. But what's that intersection of the CEO and marketing on go to market?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And there's different, different CEO profiles that I think impact, what that should look like or where is likely, kind of where are the CEO's blind spots, as well as recognizing that that looks different at different stages of a company's growth, right? So early stage CEO, and they're still doing like founder driven selling, their role when it comes to go to market and marketing specifically looks very different than once they're kind of a full sales team and a head of sales and all of that. But I think, especially for the CEOs that maybe come from more technical backgrounds or from the industries that they now serve, and maybe don't have that understanding of marketing as a discipline, I think sometimes there can be misconceptions in thinking of kind of a sliver of marketing. So campaigns and lead generation and digital presence and things like that, which are obviously, critically important, but forgetting all the areas that lead into that. So developing the strategic foundations, thinking about your brand, your messaging, your positioning, your target market segmentation, and the different ways to look at that, and bringing both that, that art and science of those kind of strategic foundations, as we always talk about them. And I think sometimes that's a byproduct of not bringing marketing in early enough or often enough, and, possibly not having the right marketers with the right skill sets, right? If you hire someone to do kind of the day-to-day program management. They might be fantastic at that, but that's not the same person. It's not the same skill set of the person that's going to help you look at like where are the opportunities in the market for expansion. How do you double down on your differentiation, or how do you enhance your differentiation when you don't have a clear story there?
Right. How do you maximize partnerships or channels or, yeah. So more of the kind of strategy work. And I think, sometimes people think marketing, well, you just push that button and launch that ad or whatever it is. It doesn't take any time, but I think giving it the time it needs to be successful,
Mm-hmm.
and the time before, you're ready to go. I would say don't underestimate that because, as we've seen, there's a lot of upfront work to maximize the result.
Right, right. And I could actually think about that from two different standpoints. There's like understanding lead times, like how long things take, how long you should let, like, let's say, like a campaign run before you know if it's working or not. And that's something that I know we do both like in the sales side as we're talking to prospective customers, is making sure we're setting kind of clear expectations,
Sure.
realistic expectations about, what we think we can drive and in what kind of time frame and what it's going to take to be successful. And then that carries through, obviously, through our client relationships to, continue being realistic about, again, what it's going to take to achieve the results that we need.
Right.
But then the other side of it, I think, is understanding the lead times of like how soon you should be bringing marketing in around like a key inflection point in the business, or I often talk about like key moments for a company, whether that's a major product launch or preparing for M&A or right looking to enter a new market. So like all of those each have their own set of kind of parameters of when and how to bring marketing in
Right.
to help kind of define it and make those decisions and conduct the research that informs some of those elements as well.
Right. Good. That is a great point. Um, so we talked a lot about business, but CEOs are people too, right? And you have a fascinating background. So I want to go and dig a little bit deeper into your own personal experiences and how that might have shaped you and who you are today. So, and you have great stories about this.
Yeah, so I would say first from a, I guess like personality standpoint, so my characteristics, like as a child, I was very shy, very reserved.
I don't believe it.
I know. People that meet me now don't believe it. I'm still like very much an introvert, like through and through, which also I think a lot of people don't believe about me. But shy as a child to the point where if my parents were proud of something I did and they were telling a story with a small group of friends, I would want to leave the room because I didn't want to hear myself being talked about in that way. But so I had kind of those characteristics at the same time. I think I was always very kind of self-driven, self-motivated, like entrepreneurial from a very young age. My mom always said she always knew I would end up in business. She didn't think to tell me that when I was exploring some very different things earlier, kind of pre-career. But both of my parents were in academia, and so I knew a lot more about universities than I ever knew about business growing up. But then there was still something driving me towards entrepreneurship. I had my very first business. I was around the age that my daughter is now, so like third, fourth grade. And my dad was a dentist and taught at Boston University. But we would get these dental catalogs of kind of branded promotional items. So, pencils and bouncy balls and different things like that. And I somehow convinced my mom to front me the money to buy some of those in bulk, right? So I bought 100 bouncy balls.
He was an early investor.
Exactly. And then a friend and I would go kind of around the neighborhood and sell them at a markup. So we obviously didn't understand any of those business concepts, but let's say sell a bouncy ball for $0.25 and you come back and then you cover your costs. And, we did that for a little while and it was lots of fun. And then I won't go into, as much detail in some of the others, but in middle school, I launched a summer camp for my younger sister and some of her friends. And I kind of built this week-long curriculum, and had a lot of fun with that. I at one point taught a digital photography class to dentists, so I was always my father was a photographer as a hobbyist. He got me into it. And when digital photography was first becoming a thing, like he and I, would have fun with, the different special effects of digital and how many pictures you could take and all of that. And then there was a need to train dentists on how to use just the very basics of using digital
Right.
photography when it was starting to take shape in the industry. And so I kind of was in front of a room. I'm sure my dad set me up with that. And was teaching them all the different kind of features and practice. It was kind of like a workshop type format.
Great.
And then my last one was working with bands in college and a little bit beyond, was managing local rock bands, doing their photography, their website, their booking. So very much a generalist in that kind of no one's ever heard of you kind of band
Yeah, right. So,
environment.
and history's repeating itself. Now you're helping companies
Yep.
who
Yep.
do the same thing. So that
Exactly.
is really funny. I just wanted to ask you, you can choose to answer this or not, but was there any like personal transformations that you went through, or, you know, anything that kind of shaped who you are today beyond kind of the entrepreneur spirit?
Yeah, and I would say for any of us, like throughout our life, we have different kind of moments that shape us, as well as just over the course of our lifetimes. I would say one area that stands out is around the pandemic.
Mm,
So everyone's got their COVID story of kind of where were they, what happened, what did it look like for them. I think for myself. My kids were young. My daughter was 3. My son was 5. I remember trying to, the preschool was trying to do Zoom sessions for the kids, which was, I guess, my own podcast, so I can swear and say it was a shit show. And then my
you're like,
son,
I'm trying to run a business.
yeah, and getting my son set up on Zoom for home learning, and he couldn't even read, let alone like get himself logged into all the different systems. So there was like that on the home front. On a more serious note, my dad had been around that same time diagnosed with Alzheimer's, which we kind of knew was coming, but had to finally like face it as a family in a different way. And then business was doing really well, so kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Like as an entrepreneur, like I was like, this is what we've been building for, and we have a lot of foundations, and we've got a great team, and existing clients needed more and different things from us. New companies were coming to us, and especially I was talking earlier about needing to do things digitally in different ways, or kind of jumping
Right.
on the digital bandwagon for companies that hadn't been selling in kind of a pandemic friendly environment. And so I think the transformation for me was a lot happening on the home and family front, business doing well, and not wanting to like miss any opportunities and kind of skip a beat there. So it kind of forced me to up my game in a way that hasn't happened the same way kind of before or
I
since.
imagine you've always been like an amazing multitasker. That's all I can say. You've always got so many plates in the air. To me, like that story is also about resilience. And I'm sure there were days that you're like, I don't think I can do this. And I guess that's a great trait for CEOs to have, is that resilience of, always bouncing back even when people say no to you or whatever. Um, and I also just wanted to cover with you, Natalie, bringing you back to a little bit to the magnitude and what are we doing? What do we do for clients today? And I know a lot of the podcast episodes are about transformation, which I think we've been so lucky to be part of a lot of those for clients. Can you talk about a little couple of like different scenarios or examples of some of the major changes, that clients have gone through?
Yeah, definitely. And I think of kind of sometimes it's what's happening externally in the environment. Like we
Mhm.
were just talking about the pandemic and what companies needed to do differently. We're talking about now with kind of AI and some of the expectations. But I think then there's also like the internal changes. So We have a client that had brought on a new CEO. The company had been, successful, but we had a fairly slow growth rate, and brought on new leadership. And one of the first things that he noticed was just how much kind of untapped opportunity there was, because they weren't really doing any marketing. They hadn't touched their website in a number of years. Marketing was kind of wasn't really like doing anything to drive, growth and visibility and all of that. So that was a case of really like the go-to-market maturity was bringing in more of that discipline around like who are we and how do we make ourselves unique and what are the right systems we need to get in place, from a sales and marketing standpoint, like automation.
And it's interesting when you're successful by some measure. How much more successful can you be when have all of the things at your disposal? So
Right.
I think, that's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing on that is what is like the right pace for an organization, which I know
Right,
always thinking about is this kind of fast and furious? And we've certainly had clients that come to us and say, we need to launch within 6 months and we don't even have a website and we, all of this kind of thing where you're kind of doing a lot in a very condensed amount of time. But then other clients, and this one that I was just thinking of, was very much like it can be a crawl, walk, run approach. There's the internal
right,
change management. So some very different motions on the sales side and the delivery side. So making sure that it's like comfortable and healthy for the organization and that marketing is kind of matching the pace of what that needs to look like.
right. And I was thinking too about another client that they were launching a SaaS product, but they were a services company. And, you always think, oh, well, everything's, we're just going to do kind of message different or whatever. Uh, but I think like fundamentally, like working through what's the go to market for that, what's different, what do you have, what programs do you do differently? How do they dovetail together? Those kinds of things is a is a big change. And I think a lot of companies are going through that now, with even productizing services, right? How do you do that in a systematic way to make things repeatable or scalable?
Right, right. All the things that need to change in the go to market, and yeah, which I think there's so many of those kinds of key moments. I feel like you and I could talk for an hour just about, any number of ones that we've worked with clients through. But we've had clients go through M&A, and one company that, combined 4 brands into their one existing one. And what does that need to look like? And all of a sudden you're selling into many different geographies and different roles and some product and some service.
Right.
And what does that look like? How do you communicate to customers along the way so that you don't lose anyone? How do you retrain your sales org? So there's all these kind of bigger picture things to think of, and the smaller ones, whether that is, if you're acquiring companies, you're merging with another company, you're looking to exit, you're launching a new product, just the types of changes that force you to really like revisit everything from a go-to-market perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that one client that of the merging of all the companies was realistic about how long that would take too. So I think back to our previous discussion about length of time that things might take. Um, so before I let you go, um, back to your day job, right? Because it's waiting. So hindsight is 2020. What advice would you give your younger self, your entrepreneurial Natalie, for your first ever leadership role?
Yeah, I love that question. I always love hearing what my guests say around that. I actually was at a dinner last night, and someone asked a similar but different question, and they said, they asked a similar question, but then they said, but not what you would listen to now. Like, what would you have actually like absorbed at that time, recognizing that,
Right.
like you said, hindsight's 2020, but we're not always like ready to hear certain lessons. So
Right.
it's just kind of an interesting thing to think about. But I guess some of the things that jump out to me, one is this kind of notion of, trusting my gut and my instincts. And that doesn't mean acting on a whim, but it's really like recognizing the knowledge and experience that I have built up. And even by the point where I was a manager for the first time, I think I didn't give myself enough credit on some of the things that I knew and that I knew really well. And even when you're kind of talking to someone who might have more seniority than you, that doesn't mean that they're the expert in kind of the same areas as you.
Right.
A second area I would say is like push myself to do the uncomfortable things. So pushing myself out of my comfort zone is something that I wish I had done more of earlier, especially when you're younger. Like the stakes feel lower, but it's something that I now like try to do both, personally, like trying new and different things, and definitely professionally, because I think that's the only way that we kind of grow and evolve and kind of meet the moment where it is. And
It's
then,
twice as satisfying when you're successful at it, too.
yes. It's but I think you might grow more in the things that maybe you're not successful from, and you see like I survived this. I still learned things along the way and gonna come out
And I'm
stronger
going to try it
on the
again.
other side. Yep. Yeah. I think the last thing I would say is just celebrating wins early and often, and not just always like moving the goalposts. And I think I have a tendency to just move my own goalposts. Like, all right, I've achieved this goal, so like, what's next? But stopping to really like appreciate what I've done, what my team has done, I think is so important. And definitely not just for myself, but celebrating, the great work that's happening, like client wins and team wins, and just making
Right.
sure that you give yourself that time to stop and reflect and appreciate.
That's great advice. Natalie, it's been so great to have this time with you. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I'll just say thank you for doing this with me. I know it took me a little time to get in the mode of being a podcast host, and you just jumped in 2 feet first, and it's been a lot of fun. So thank you.
So great. And I think people probably know how to get in touch with you, but do you, and I'll tell you, magnitudeconsulting.com is one way. But connect with you on LinkedIn. Is that a good idea?
Yeah. I think LinkedIn is best. I love LinkedIn. I'm very active there. And my LinkedIn is linkedin.com/Natalie Nathanson. So always love connecting with new folks, whether it's, to talk shop, leadership, go to market, if you, interested in connecting on the podcast. So I love making new connections there.
Okay, great. Well, thanks to everybody who is listening. And I really loved, Natalie, hearing your kind of a unique perspective on pushing the envelope for AI. And I think there was some really great takeaways there. And then the other thing that kind of struck me was just your commitment, and obviously the company's commitment to helping companies grow and transform and remain successful. So kudos to you. If today's episode, you just loved it, you gotta share it with somebody. So pass the knowledge around to wherever you can. And so thanks again, Natalie, for having us. And another fantastic conversation on Shift and Thrive. What can we say? We'll see you the next time, where Natalie will be back hosting.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Nat. Bye.
That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnetude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.